that's a fine micron. It's basically the things that you ever know. So you same thing. You take it, you put in the ball, you pump it up a bunch. And then you're able to stretch and lay it out. And you think about it, it's just incredibly lightweight. I mean, you're not sure. These were like 5 bucks.
Are we excited? Nervous? There's only like, I don't know, 500,000 people that watch it, so it's not like that big.
It's a number ratio.
Not much. We don't have work sessions anymore. It's all.
So we're, guys, just so you know, we're now live.
Twice a month. First and third. Work sessions, you're not supposed to have voting items. And we have a lot of need for committees.
Oh, I thought it was very.
Why would you do it for me? That was a hard no from everyone. You're on the session? I'm pressing one. It's community service club. I drove my mom's car. You have a.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Wednesday, February 1st, 2023 meeting of the Abington Heights School Board. Start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, could I have a roll call?
Here.
Here.
Here. Here.
Here.
Here.
At this time, I would like to introduce Mr. Lott and our Abington Heights Middle School Science Olympiad team, who's going to be talking to us a little bit today about Science Olympiad and, of course, their successes.
All right, good evening. Thanks for having us here today. Again, my name's Steve Lott. I've been coaching Science Olympiad team at the middle school for 16 years now. And so tonight we brought a few of our kids who have been with us for at least a couple years here to talk about the program a little. And we're just about to start into our main competition season for the year now, starting this weekend. So I'm going to start off. Who's starting? Both of you? Okay, so here we have a 9th grader, Sona Hanumali, and 8th grader, Ananya. I won't call you Bananya. Ananya. So here we go, ladies.
gonna start? No. Okay. So we're part of the middle school science Olympiad team, right? And science Olympiad is just a huge like bonding experience, really. Each year, at the start of after school, which usually like starts in October, Mr. Lott he'll send an announcement out to the school and he'll recruit people for the science Olympiad team every year.
Each person on the Science Olympiad team does events, and each event includes studying for a particular field. For example, disease detectives is studying for epidemiology, which is the study of disease. And there are knowledge events, which are at competition. That means you take a 1-hour time test on college level material. And there are also build events, which means that you build stuff for competitions.
We usually do a lot of competitions every year, around 6. Our first one usually starts in December. It's an invitational. It's kind of like a practice competition, really. So we'll do about one in December, maybe one in February, a couple in January. Those are invitationals, which are kind of like practice competitions. The actual competition starts in March, which is a regional tournament. We compete with other schools from our region who have a team like this. Our state's competition is usually in late April. Whoever gets top 10 place in the regional team then moves on to the state competition, and we compete with different school districts from our state.
I don't think we've ever not made it to states. So, like I mentioned before, these knowledge events are usually for college level material. Like I usually get roped into doing a physics event every year. First 2 years were electricity physics, and these past 2 years have been working on wave physics, light waves, electromagnetic waves, etc. And these events are really hard. It's the type of math that you wouldn't expect anyone to know. It's difficult enough for like a 10th grader to learn, and I was trying to learn it in 8th grade on my own. But it's definitely important that you do an event that you're interested in, because then you have that motivation to study for it outside of school, which is what everyone has to do.
Science Olympiad usually focuses on like college level areas of study. It can range from anything from like astronomy to like physics to biology, anything really. It really challenges students though, because we're given like college level test material, something you would learn in like your undergrad years, and we're giving them as middle schoolers. So it really challenges us. It puts us like above our peers. It's like an inspiring extracurricular, really.
It definitely helps with things outside of Science Olympiad, like just being a test taker in general. I was introduced to those time tests in Science Olympiad when I had those 60 minutes to take this really, really difficult test. You learn when to struggle over a problem and when to skip it. And when you learn how to time yourself, if the math is taking the right amount of time, or if you're struggling and you should skip even though you know how to solve the problem. And I mean, today and yesterday I took midterms, and I barely stressed over them because I've been taking these difficult tests for a while now. I mean, my science midterm was 100 questions, and I finished it with 18 minutes left to spare. Checked every answer.
Although the college major thing can be a little difficult, it's definitely challenging at times, but it really can help us in further studies. If you were to talk about like college majors, there's definitely like a kind of different stress that comes with that. If you don't have like a career in mind, it's definitely hard to like choose a major in college. Science Olympiad really helps you explore that. If you want to become a science major but don't know what kind of field, like astronomy or physics or biology, in Science Olympiad you can explore different types of events, such as like astronomy events, like I was saying, or disease detectives, which both of us do. You can explore these, see which ones you like, see which ones you don't like, and if you like something, you can go further with it.
And Science Olympiad teaches you more than just how to take a test. It teaches you how to research, how to manage your time, but also cram effectively the night before, how to read size 3 font. I learned that one in 6th grade. And how to have fun even during a stressful time. Competition days are some of my favorite days, despite the test that's an hour of the day and incredibly stressful.
Science Olympiad also goes beyond like the studying part of it. There's also creativity involved. So if you could see the shirts we're wearing today, they have a little science joke pasted on the back. We do a different science joke like this each year. The students come up with them ourselves. We usually get inspiration from the internet or we create them ourselves. It really focuses on creativity, and we vote for our favorite joke during when the time comes, and then we get our shirts printed. And that's how they turn out.
This year's t-shirts is why is your password, and I forget the number, but they're all the numbers are the atomic masses of the symbols of the periodic table, and it spells pancakes.
Science Olympiad is also a huge bonding experience. As I said, there's different people on the team. You really get to meet people from different backgrounds, but people who are also interested in the same things as you, such as like levels of science, right? We can talk, we can have like intellectual conversations, but just like as friends, we also tend to like bond together a lot during Science Olympiad. Meetings tend to be fun. We do study, we do work, but we also talk with each other. It's really a nice experience. We also get to meet with people from other school districts as we go to like invitationals, regionals, and states, stuff like that. I have some friends that go to other school districts in the state, and I get to meet them. I get to talk with them. You get to meet new people. You get to learn from people. You get to learn from people from other schools, really, even. You get to learn so much more about them, what they do in the school, how they conduct it, how they study for Science Olympiad. So you can even get tips from them.
So Ananya and I, we both specialize in knowledge events, but Martin and Prayush, they do build events, and they'd like to come up here.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Prayesh Malaya. I'm here today to present you my rubber-powered airplane. So for the event, it's basically the event. The gist of it is building an airplane with the design log. To get for your airplane, you have to get the most amount of flight involved. So I'll start off with how I built it first. So this is all made from balsa wood, and if you see here the wings, these are carbon fibers. So and the wings also the plastic filament. They're basically vegetable bags, but then I just crushed them up and stretched them out really tightly. So then then I glued them on with adhesive to the carbon fiber, and for these two wings. You can see where this is a little bit bent because I stretched it too far. It's too tight. So it has a little bit of warp to it. So uh, for just of like the rubber band, how it like flies properly. So like I have this winder, it's 15-to-1 ratio winder, and I wind the rubber band firstly on a torque meter so I can see how many like turns I'm putting into the flight and how much torque I'm putting on that rubber band. So then when I reach a certain torque, I take off that rubber band from the torque machine and I attach it to the propeller. I didn't put the propeller on. It's like it's only attached with the rubber band and it goes all the way up until here to this hook. So when I attach it to the rubber band to the propeller, it goes back right here, and then I just let it go slightly, and then it just flies. Just hold the propeller, and it flies. It should go in like a perfect circle. Usually, like the best flight times, they accumulate air. They keep rising up, and then at the top, they keep going in circles and slowly come down. And usually my flight doesn't do that now. I have to keep adjusting it and keep improving it. At last year in 5th grade, I built a similar flight. It was called electric red stuff. It was actually electrically powered by a capacitor right here. And I didn't do so well in that last year. So I was asking like how was it learning experience Science Olympiad? I asked other teams like Harlan Row about their flight. They did amazingly well. Like it was beautifully made. I was asking them a lot of like tips, and it was such a learning experience. I got to bond with new people, and I got to learn new stuff. And that I think that's all. I'll pass it on to Martin.
All right, so bridge building, as you probably guessed it, it's just all about building bridges and testing them over and over again, basically trial and error, right? So pretty straightforward. The main goal of the event is to build a bridge and try to make it really lightweight while also letting it hold a lot of weight to get the highest possible score. So the way I build these is first I cut up the compression members with a self-laminated balsa wood, which is pretty nice. Then I construct the sides, and then I basically angle them to the correct angle and connect them together with these very thin balsa members. So this bridge is 100% made out of balsa wood, and it's very lightweight, coming in at around 10.6 to 10.8 grams, adjusting for humidity differences and stuff. Okay, so yeah, this design, it might look pretty weird, and the way this is done at the tournaments, it might look really small on top and really long on the bottom. So the way we do this is we put this on the testing platform. There's like two blocks, a block here and a block here, and there's a clear span, which is like, I think 35 centimeters for this here. And then we put a loading block on top, which is hooked to a chain at the bottom, which then leads to a 5-gallon bucket, which we slowly fill with sand until the bridge either breaks or holds the full 15 kilograms. And if it does hold the full 15 kilograms without breaking, you also get a 5-kilogram bonus. And then to determine the score, we weight held divided by the bridge's weight for the efficiency.
Just got one thing to wrap up. So since they mentioned states, yeah, this will be our 13th year at states, because what do I always say, guys, if we don't make states? I quit. So I plan on doing this till the end of my career, but the state trip is the culmination. We make a field trip day out of it. It's out at PSU Altoona. So we tend to go out. Last year we went bowling for a while, and usually we try and do a team dinner, and then we always stay in hotels that are packed with Science Olympiad teams. And what sets us apart from the other teams is the fact that the night before states, the other teams are studying, and these guys are in the swimming pool until it closes at 11 o'clock at night. So we have a lot of fun too. But they're a good bunch of kids. I really enjoy working with them each year. So.
Thank you so much. We have some certificates of appreciation we'd like to provide.
Thank you for coming out and sharing with us. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Watt.
Okay, we're going to move on to the next item. I'd like a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, we're going to move on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Schaefer?
Okay, thank you very much. Is my microphone on or not? Okay, thank you, Mr. Azar. First, I have to say that it was wonderful having our our Science Olympiad students here because it was an inadvertent, fantastic transition to what we'll be talking about tonight. And that's a K-12 facility study. And I say that because one of the students said, and I quote, this is an inspiring extracurricular activity. And tonight, we're going to take our first step in learning about the K-12 facility study completed by KCBA. And this certainly will inform long-term planning in Abington Heights. And one of the things that we need to keep in the front of our minds is what will it take to inspire our students a decade from now? How will we prepare our students for the future? What do we need to do to provide them with excellent resources? So before I kick things off and introduce our architects today, I want to take a moment to frame our work this spring. Tonight, we are going to listen to an overview of a K-12 facility study. And it's exactly that. It's a study where the board has asked KCBA to look at all options on the table. We need to have a better understanding of the needs across all of our facilities and all options. This is not the time where we begin to decide what options are off the table. This spring, our focus will be on the what. What are the priorities? We're not going to focus in on solutions. It's really easy to ask the questions, how are we going to do it? At this point, our focus will be on learning more about our facilities and gathering feedback from each of our school communities. With that said, if you go to our website, ahsd.org, halfway down, you will see a message board and you'll see the K-12 facility study in its entirety. If you click on that, you'll have access to the study. And also in the left-hand column, there will be a link to an advertisement that will list the 3 community sessions we will have. The first one will be on Wednesday, February the 22nd at 6 o'clock at Clark Summit Elementary. We will be there with KCBA, and our focus will be on all of the elementary schools. We'll have the opportunity to do a deep dive on just the elementary schools in the study. We'll also have the experts on hand to answer our questions. On Tuesday, February the 28th at 6 o'clock at the middle school, the same thing will be done with a focus on the middle school. And finally, on Wednesday, March 8th at the high school at 6 p.m., where we'll take a look at the study results for the high school. Tomorrow at 9 a.m., all of this information will be sent out via school messenger. And during this whole process, we want to capture your feedback. It doesn't matter how many times you give us feedback. I understand that as you learn more about this process, you may want to provide us with more feedback. So at the end of the survey that you will see, at the end of the presentation that's posted on our website, the last slide, there is a QR code. If you put your phone up to that with the camera, you'll get a link to click onto, and that will take you to our survey, and you'll be able to provide us with feedback. The same thing will happen at all 3 community sessions. The facilities committee at that point in the spring will take all of the feedback that we've learned, we'll synthesize that, we'll categorize that, and we'll bring that to the board as a whole. That way we can start to begin some discussions about what the community wants to focus on, and that will inform not only our short-term planning, but our long-term planning. So with that said, I've asked our architects at KCBA to come here today and provide us with a executive overview of the study. And they will be also allocating some time tonight to answer some questions that board members may have, and perhaps the one audience member that we have who may have questions. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce KCBA and Mike Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Schaefer. Thank you, board. Good to see everyone. My name is Michael Kelly. This is Emily Layutza. We were the head of the study for the facilities of your district. Before I start, I'll say I still have my balsa bridge. I still remember this day. And when it broke, my instructor called it a spectacular failure. And I still don't know if that was good or bad, but I passed this, but it's sitting at my parents' house, so I remember that exercise. It's fun. As you said, I mean, this is why we're doing this. It's for those kids, for those opportunities. There are hundreds of additional stories and those things. That's the focus of looking at the facilities, is making sure that we're creating the best environment for our students to learn. As you said, the full report is loaded on the district website. There's a written report of more information and more analysis and things from the architects and engineering companies that look through everything. So tonight I wanted to go through a whole bunch of slides very quickly, but certainly get to a point where we can ask some questions. I'll show you some schedules of how long it takes, how involved it takes to do some upgrades of buildings, and all of the opportunities for community involvement, school board involvement, certainly teachers and student involvement. You know, ask these guys what they think about the middle school. Ask these guys what they would like to see at the high school. Those are always very informative opportunities. So I'll start tonight by kind of a brief overview of the study itself. And we always say that we look at two things when we're reviewing the schools: all the educational and the operational needs. The operational side, it's got roofs, it's got windows, it can't leak, we have to heat and cool. It's like any building, any house that someone may have. But on the educational side, these are schools, so they've got to function as schools. We have to make sure, as I just mentioned, that these are spaces worthy of the students that are within them, and certainly catering to changing curriculum in our schools. So we are looking at both sides of that, how the physical building looks, and certainly how the educational program is delivered within them. So tonight we're going to talk about those, the focus and the goals. We're going to do some quick analysis of each building, give some summary recommendations, talk about next steps, and as Mr. Shaver had mentioned, set up for some public discussion. To date, we did have, it was right at the end of the summer actually, our team and several engineers walked through all the buildings. So we've walked through everything. We've kind of looked above ceiling tiles, went down into the boiler rooms and things. We interviewed a lot of the building principals and staff. We have multiple meetings with district administrators. And tonight is that first public opportunity to present this. And as was mentioned, there will be multiple listening and feedback sessions to follow in the next couple of months. So the keys to the success of not only doing these studies, but planning and how to implement things along the way is assessing the existing conditions and then prioritizing recommendations. As you can imagine, there's going to be a lot of recommendations. There's going to be a lot of things that are listed to do, a pretty overwhelming list at times. Prioritizing is the best way to set those goals, understand what's most important, and be able to achieve some of the improvements that you're looking for. And the last thing, and certainly important as well, is planning for that implementation. The time it takes, the financial investment it takes, what it means to borrow large sums of money, what it means to move money around from different buildings to different funds to other things, how to pay for those things, and how to certainly implement those improvements over time. So the focus: existing building conditions, delivery of educational programs, looking at all 4 elementary schools, the middle school, the high school, the fitness center at the high school. And actually, just recently, we walked through, again, this building as well to provide some analysis of the district office. The goals: provide some recommendations for improvements and long-term planning. What should be done right away? Are there any things that we're going, oh, hey, look out, this is something we should what we should focus on right away. There's a safety issue, a security issue. Analyze educational improvements, look at STEM curriculum, the challenges of the middle school layout. We heard some things very early on about some concerns about that. And as I mentioned, prioritize how do we do this? How do we do this in the future, and focusing on student faculty safety. So a little pause before we get into the meat of things. What exactly is 21st century education? Well, the first thing is it's 25% over. We're all almost through this already. When you blink, it's February of 23. But we talk about 21st century education. It's different from how things were set up. And most of schools in Pennsylvania were built in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s. They were added onto in the 70s. It's a very different time. It's a different type of curriculum. It's a very different type of how education was delivered. So as the work, and it's changing because the workforce is changing. We're teaching students or challenging students to be different in different workforce environments. So since the workforce has changed, that's why teaching has changed. And our school buildings need to be adaptable to those educational changes. Some can be adapted very well, others a little bit more challenging. So that's the reason we're standing here going, the building of the 40s might be fine for the 40s, but we need to make sure that we're providing opportunities for students like we spoke with tonight to do that. We don't work in atmospheres like this anymore with large cubicles all over the place because we've learned that environment is not necessarily conducive for the workforce. So we don't teach in rooms like this where we're stacking 45 kids in a room and we're lecturing to them all day and the heating and cooling is really bad and the acoustics is bad, the lighting is bad. So we're not teaching things in that way. We're starting to teach our students more in environments like this, smaller groups, more one-on-one instruction, the ability for the spaces to be flexible, furniture to be flexible. Even before COVID, we all understood the importance of indoor air quality. These are the types of spaces, these are the types of environments that we're looking to provide for our students so that learning happens outside of the classroom. It's really limitless, providing teachers the ability to be unique in their lesson plans and not be restricted by a small room with a whole bunch of fixed chairs that are attached to a desk with a basket underneath for your book bag. What we heard as we spoke with a lot of your educators was very much that, hey, the program is great, the curriculum is great. I wish I had more space. I wish I had more storage. I wish I had an additional sink or three in an art space. So there are a lot of the things that they're teaching and the engagement with the students are positive. Everybody wants a little bit more space, a little bit more of a modern facility, a little bit of more of an opportunity to expand that curriculum. So that was a big focus of ours, again, as we kind of analyzed the buildings and worked our way through. So that set us up. So then we started walking through all of the existing facilities. Again, we're looking at functionality, conditions, HVAC systems, that's heating and cooling, and certainly safety protocols as well. A brief thing about safety and school safety, you look at both the exterior and the interior of the buildings, making sure we have things like identifiable from entrances, vehicular circulation, athletic fields and play fields that are secured, interior spaces, locked doors. It's one of the simplest things you can imagine, but that's sometimes one of the bigger challenges. Unfortunately, we hear some of those things when tragedies occur that it was just human error, things like a locked door or a propped open door or something like that. Building-wide announcement systems as well, the ability for anyone, anywhere, any place in the building to make an announcement. Those are some of just the kind of little things that we can kind of get started with when we talk about school safety and security. This is a little tough. A couple of quick ones that we saw. At South Abington, part of the site is a challenge for a number of reasons, but one of the things is a singular means of egress onto that site. There's only one drive off that main road. It's shared with a public park. We have buses and cars and parents all colliding, things like that. So there's some challenges just with how the site is set up because of that limited site circulation and access onto the site. At Newton-Ramsden, one of my favorite spaces are those open spaces in the middle of each of those pods, which are very, very cool. There's locked doors into the classroom, but there's not locked doors into the pods. So if those pods were secured, you would have the ability to kind of move around and have a little bit more of a freer space in that area. And then certainly if the need for a lockdown occurred, you're not only locking down the classroom, but you're also locking down the pods. Clark Summit, the vestibule, the secure vestibule where you're kind of waiting for somebody to be checked in, and the admin space where they may be going are disconnected, meaning somebody comes in, needs to speak to the principal or needs to be checked by the secretary. They go, sure, come on in. You hit a button and you're in the hallway. So typically you'd like to be able to link those so that you could have someone come immediately into the admin space. At the middle school, there's a number of issues, and certainly circulation within the, we'll call it the half circle area. The corridors are very, very small, very, very skinny. That building was originally built as an open pod school, meaning there were no walls at all in some of those areas. So as we kind of learned that didn't really function very well, newer walls were kind of propped up. They're not fire resistant. They're not very acoustically set up, and there's certainly a lot of issues there in the school, not only circulation there. There are a lot of exterior doors on that building. Like every classroom had its own fire exit. So that's that many more doors that are a little older. Some are a little easier to open. So there's some concerns there just about the amount of openings there in the school. So that was just kind of a brief overview of a few things that we saw that really kind of stuck out to us for school security. Improvements for indoor air quality, as I mentioned, again, pre-COVID, this was a big deal, and certainly post-COVID, I think everybody is that much more cognizant of it. Schools, and most of the elementary schools in particular, are heated. They're not cool. That also means they're not conditioned for indoor air quality. We'll call that filtration and air recycling. In any space, in a space like this, you want to be able to recycle the air in that space 4 times every hour, meaning new air is coming in, old air is going out. That new air is certainly filtered for not only dust, but could be flu and COVID and other things like that. It cleans the air. It's fresh air. You've sometimes heard the term sick building syndrome, where things are just old. We're all breathing the same air over and over again. It's all what we worried about being on airplanes. You're just breathing the same air over and over again. Well, that can happen in schools as well. So we have to heat the building, because we don't want things to freeze. Cooling is a big part of air conditioning, but just more than just bringing the air temperature down to 72 degrees, monitoring the CO2 levels in those spaces is equally important as well. So that's certainly a concern at the elementary school where there is no building-wide air system. Everything is essentially just kind of heated and blown into the space. Whole bunch of other analysis and things that was part of a deliverable that was brought to the district, a facilities conditions index, meaning we ranked all of these topics and we ranked all of these things by 0 being, okay, that's fine, you're in good shape there, to a 5 of saying, hey, this is an immediate need. So it's kind of like golf, you want your score to be low. The total possible points was 140. And the results of some of those things kind of ranged from a 44%, meaning you're getting there to a point where you need to do some work at some of the schools. Clark Summit kind of had the lowest, fewest needs, to something at 67%, which was the middle school that we felt had kind of the greatest needs. So you can kind of see a chart here that says, if you're in the 40s, you're in fair condition. There's some things to work on over time, but certainly anything over 60%, we kind of deem that as a bit of a poor condition facility and something that may need a bit more immediate needs or some more dramatic action. You can see here that list of all of the schools. You can see when they were built. Again, the 60s, the 50s, the 20s, the 70s, the 60s. Newton Ramsden obviously has a low score there as well, as you would hope to be as kind of a newer school. Clark Summit had some work done in the past. But things like most of these schools, really all 6 of them, had some sort of mechanical upgrades in the early 90s. And really that's been about it. Most mechanical systems and things like that, if you look at a score of where the breakdown of each kind of category, and MEP is mechanical, electrical, plumbing. So that kind of shows you in most of the cases, those are the highest numbers in each of the schools' analysis. Most heating and cooling systems last about 20, 25 years. You're close to year 30 or higher, which shows you're doing a good job of maintaining them. But there's only so much you can do sometimes when things are 5, 10 years kind of past their useful life, it's time to start looking at replacing them, or at least start budgeting for their replacement there. And so you can see at the middle school, out of all of the categories, all of the things, interior layout was one of the things that had the most concerns there. So the takeaways from that is HVAC and infrastructure improvements are needed really at all the buildings. Introduction of kind of modern educational spaces is also needed and desired at certainly many of the schools. And the existing middle school, again, as we kind of knew and we're not warned, but told of, let's say, before everything started, we know that the middle school has some of the larger challenges. So our impressions are, again, focusing on indoor air quality. The elementary schools are at close to or full capacity. I mean, they're not overcrowded, but there's not a lot of additional space. And as more needs for special education occur, there's limited spaces for that. We know you have half-day kindergarten. If there was ever a desire to go to full-day kindergarten, there's going to be obviously additional stresses. You would need additional classrooms. The half circle at the middle school is in poor condition and really not conducive to what we would consider to be a modern educational environment. And we'll get in a little bit more into that in a minute. The high school is in good shape, but there's certainly areas in the building that could be renovated, modernized. It's a Pennsylvania high school. It was built, expanded. There's some terrific programs in it, but there's certainly some areas, libraries and things like that, that are just stuck in the 90s. And what should a new library be? What's a space that would kind of inspire kids and excite kids in the high school? So our initial thoughts, things that we'll say can be renovated. Indoor air quality, as I said, it was kind of all replaced in the earlier mid-90s. Improving some of those learning environments. Many of the spaces have never been renovated. So there's opportunities in a lot of the buildings. A lot of them have really good bones to just kind of say, all right, what can we do in a space like this? I mentioned the library at the high school. There are a couple of areas at the elementary school. The pods at New Ramsden are very cool. Are those spaces the abilities to kind of renovate, accentuate some of the programs and things that are going on in there? And then safety protocols as well, just kind of looking, going around the school, looking at exterior doors at the middle school, making sure everything locks, providing locks on every door in the school. Again, there were some that should be or could be changed. We want teachers to be able to close the door and have that locked inside. They shouldn't have to go outside the classroom to lock it. Doors should fail locked. They should always be locked. When we say locked a lot. I heard a great seminar the other day about security and talking with teachers. And they said, this is something to ask. When you wake up in the morning and you leave your house, what do? You lock the door. When you got to work today and you left your car, what'd you do? You lock the door. Then you go into a classroom where you're responsible for 25 little children. What'd you do? You propped it open. You used a magnet over a strip to make sure the door didn't lock. That doesn't make a lot of sense. So locking the doors into the school buildings, making sure we have proper locks into our classrooms, that's always not to say an easy focus, but certainly an area to kind of look at, walk through the schools, and just make sure you have the abilities to do proper lockdowns in all of the schools. So that's what we talk about best practices. I'll go very quick through the individual assessments. Again, this is all information that is available online. But we did do individual assessments of every building. So we were looking at inside the building, carpet, lighting, ceilings, walls, windows, all of those things are available online. One thing to note at Clark Summit, as with a lot of schools again in Pennsylvania, wasn't always an elementary school. So there are very large spaces here, which are great, but some of that stuff was set up for junior and senior high. So you have locker rooms in the basement. The gym being a large gym, that's perfectly fine. But there's a lot of space there that's a little dated, a little old, could use just with a little bit of idea here and there, could really refresh that building again. Great bones, again, just needs a little TLC. In a lot of your schools, we'll call areas that are not ADA compliant. ADA is Americans with Disabilities Act. It's essentially handicap accessibility. Plumbing fixtures are the easiest target. You can see, urinals, that's not really ADA compliant, or as a guy, I will tell you that's not the greatest way to to use a bathroom. You know, certainly that's a stall next to it where there's no way for a wheelchair to go in. You know, sinks and things like that. Those are things that are just not ADA compliant. We saw that early in all of the schools. This one in particular, I joked before, you're storing a lot of chairs at this school. So there's a lot of storage that could certainly be cleaned out, or that would allow maybe some other things to go in to kind of declutter some other spaces. And then, you know, if you have a little bit more room, then maybe one of those kind of modern spaces could be infused kind of inside an existing room or inside of the space within the building. Exterior as well, it's a beautiful site. You know, there's some cracks and things like that in the pavement, but that's again to be expected. And again, some additional things here. This is the one elementary school that houses houses 3 autistic support and some emotional support classrooms. So some of those district support things are happening at this building in lieu of not having it in some of the other spaces. So here's some of the recommendations again for educational improvements. You know, maybe kind of create a cheerier environment in that building. You know, some of that could just be done with paint and, you know, carpet and lighting. When it comes to HVAC issues, you can see this for all the schools really, is replacing and upgrading the HVAC system and adding air conditioning and indoor air quality monitoring. Again, just kind of modernizing the infrastructure of that building. Newton Ramsden, a smaller school, built right by the middle school. Again, here is another example where the entry vestibule is separate from the admin space. In that little connector tunnel, there's water coming up from the floor and there's water coming in from the ceiling above. So we've kind of noted that in some of the reports to look at fixing, and that's, you know, summer projects and things like that to take a look at how some of that is drained and maybe replacing some areas with the roof. This is set up in good pods, we'll say, where we have enclosed classrooms. Even the pods themselves are closed up. So it's a very cool environment. Again, there's a lot of things inside those pods that could be decluttered, maybe reimagined a little bit, but the space itself is very, very nice, and kind of a nice space there. The site's big. One of the things we're kind of focusing on here, you have a fenced-in playground on the left. You have some areas in the middle where that kind of the connector piece of the pod is that might want to just have a fence or a gate or something to kind of keep people from, you know, if they don't know where the front door is, going over there and they start looking at doors. You know, if they have a gate there and a sign that says, hey, the front door is over there, we thought that was a nice security consideration. And just like you fenced the one playground, maybe we fenced the other one, especially due to its proximity to the woods. It's not necessarily things coming out of the woods, it's little kids running into the woods. That can be a security concern sometimes as well. So some of the recommendations there is just, you know, finding some ways to enhance the pods. And then HVAC wise, again, securing school doors or classroom doors. This is one of the schools that we kind of cited with some more needs for locks, and maybe create you know, that connection there between the entry vestibule and the administration offices. South Abington is an older building. There are some masonry and some issues kind of around some areas around the outside of the building that we kind of noted again to be repaired and just kind of looked at as days go on. It's another building with kind of older carpet and maybe some ideas there to kind of modernize some of the spaces there. No air conditioning, and again, indoor air quality would be helpful. I blew this up to kind of talk about some of the things that we were picking on in a classroom. So you've got older carpet there that's just old, it's worn. We really see hard surfaces in most elementary school classes because kids spill stuff. It's a lot easier to clean. You can have throw rugs and things down because a lot of times they want to have, you know, a little nice comfy area to read. But having a floor that's, you know, moppable and things like that is again, easier for maintenance and for health reasons as well. Chalkboards, a lot of times we're seeing chalkboards going to whiteboards just for dust and allergies and things like that. Every one of the sinks in classrooms are not ADA compliant. So again, anywhere where you do have a sink, it needs to be compliant. Fluorescent lighting, that's, you know, again, kind of a technology of the past. There's an opportunity for maybe some some upgrades there for energy efficiency. There are 1 or 2 ADA compliant toilet rooms, but they're also being used as storage rooms. And so as soon as the storage is being brought into the restrooms, they're no longer, they don't have the clearances anymore. Now they're not ADA compliant anymore. So again, there's always a need for storage. There's always a need for things like that, which we certainly sympathize with. But the 1 or 2 facilities that are ADA compliant are rendered not by adding some storage. This is the biggest tell of the South Abington story. There's your school. That big blue blob is a floodplain. The creek obviously is right along the side here. It has flooded in the past. It is within FEMA's 100-year floodplain. And the saying is recently has been the problem with 100-year floodplains is it's happening every 10 years now. So not on clockwork, but it's certainly not waiting 100 years to have issues. This is not something that's fixable. This is something that in other districts that we've partnered with, the recommendation has been keep it as long as it's fine. If you add anything new, keep it way off the floor and think about long-term what you may do in a space like this. This would maybe, as we talked earlier about prioritizing, this may not be a building to prioritize highly because it may be a building you may consider leaving in the future. Again, the programs are great, kids are great, teachers are great, everything inside it is great. This is a challenge long-term to think about because there really is no way to fix that. So again, if we're thinking about indoor air quality issues here, the systems you would choose would have to be placed on the roof, which would just kind of limit some of the things you can do. You could certainly do it, and it could be a recommendation, but this would not be the building in our recommendation to spend millions and millions of dollars in long term because of those, because of that concern there. Again, here, just because of the size of the school, meaning there's not a whole lot of students there, you do have some areas like shared music and art, so you kind of have one room that's got art and one half of the room that's got music. Both are great programs, but again, if you give somebody half the amount of space, there's a little limit of things that they could actually do in those spaces. So some of the recommendations here about finishes and classroom furniture, just kind of updating some of that classroom technology, HVAC wise, again, kind of think about HVAC systems and indoor air quality, and as I mentioned, kind of consider the long-term viability of that site. Lastly, at Waverly, this was built in 1926. On that plaque, it says that the construction started in June and was completed in November. So back in the day, they built a school in 5 months. That's impressive. Again, the school's in fine shape for something that was built in the 20s in 5 months. But this is one of the buildings as a 2-story building that really has some serious indoor air quality concerns. We were there in August, and it was 87 degrees in that classroom, and school was starting the next week. This is a school that I would, in my mind, you would start with an indoor air quality, air conditioning renovation. A 2-story building, especially on the second floor, heat rises, it gets warm. So this is a space that could be a prime candidate as a priority for indoor air quality improvements. Again, recommendations here was talking about possibly either reducing the enrollment to allow for a little bit more space in the building, because a lot of kids are on top of one another, or what you might consider, because here you also have a disconnected front door to the admin space. Well, you can't really expand that building a lot. That area in the front is all paved. If we had a small area in the front that was the new administrative area, the new secure front office, some ADA compliant bathrooms, then all of a sudden you take the administration area, you turn that into a library space, you turn that into art. Now all of a sudden on the second floor, the 2 classrooms that were converted to become the library can go back to classrooms. The 1 classroom that was converted to be art is another classroom. So now without building a huge addition onto the school full of classrooms, I've got 3 more classrooms full of space to kind of balance out some of the learning support needs and things like that. I have a brand new library and a brand new art room, and now I have the secure vestibule, the secure admin space, and all that in the front. on. So that seemed to be one suggestion for that school, along with certainly the HVAC project there. And again, that was the highlight piece there, was replace the existing system. So the summary of those were, again, building capacity and class size are appropriate, but there's not a lot of extra space. There's some great play space. You guys do a really good job with playgrounds and open spaces and things like that. It's really great. And again, the general construction of the schools are, the construction is the word there to use. This construction of the schools is suited for long-term use. The challenge is South Abington's site, as I mentioned with the floodplain. So a need for indoor air quality improvements, ADA improvements, and maybe just providing some security enhancements around all the schools. This goes into additional recommendations, which is kind of saying the same thing again. Infrastructure improvements, think long-term expansion possibilities, possibly at New Ramsden, and Clark Summit, maybe in that new entry that I just mentioned at Waverly, and then what considerations for even something like full-day kindergarten would necessarily create in the remaining schools. So on to the middle school. Again, built in the 70s. This is when that open pod idea was evidently all the rage. We've seen a few of these middle schools. Northampton area middle school down just outside of Allentown had a middle school that was 3 circles. So you only have a half a circle, so you're doing better than they do. But again, it's certainly a challenge. As I mentioned, there's entry vestibule connection to the administration was actually created here. So you can kind of see how that was an example of how something could be retrofitted. You have the open cafeteria, which is nice, but a little loud. The curved corridors and things really, again, are part of the challenge there. I mentioned here about exit doors from the pods are a security issue because they're not monitored. You would need more cameras. Some of those doors are old and can be kind of jimmied open. And then when you're in, you have, I don't know who's in any of those stair towers. They don't really link to anything that can be easily monitored. A lot of issues with ADA, again, anytime you have knobs, you can see on the doors here, everything is latches and locks and things like that is a challenge. Here, one of the examples I wanted to show was all of the windows where there are windows, and there's not many, are single pane glass, meaning they're not insulated. So that's a huge energy loss there. Just the width of the exterior wall, there's no insulation in that wall. So if we were to renovate this, one of the things we would do is actually spray insulation on the inside of the building and try to create an insulated barrier internally, because there's just no, the R value of things is just very, very low here. So it would be difficult to make this building more energy efficient. That's the type of really invasive things that we would have to do to kind of do those types of things. Stair handrails, things like that that aren't at the right height. There's a lot of damage and things coming out of concrete here. When you see this, this means water is getting in to the cavity behind the bricks, and because there's no ways for that to come out, it finds its own way out. It freezes, it thaws, and then over years it pops. So now you've got areas of the building that are literally just coming apart. As I mentioned, the half circle is kind of the old open pod system. We have a lot of kids in some of those classes, and they're very, very small because they were just kind of retrofitted. And some of them have very limited natural light or none. And it's just kind of, again, a reaction to an older educational system at the time. So when we kind of analyze this building here, we look at, it's 140 square feet of space. 60,000 of that is not the half circle. So there are some areas of rectilinear spaces that certainly could be retrofitted or re-examined. It's really that second half. These are all spaces like band and orchestra and STEM, and the art room there's only 3, and there's really only 2, but you have 3 programs. So one of the art rooms is split in half. You have STEM, which is kind of trying to get itself involved more, but they're in the corner, and you have to walk through one room to get to another. So that rectangle up there could certainly be renovated a bit. You do have 4 classes here from 5th grade to 8th grade. So the amount of kids in this building is more than, let's say, a traditional middle school meeting. There's only 3 grades. So I think that's where some of those struggles occur. The common classes you need more of because you have an additional grade there. There were some issues and concerns about the gym sizes. This is where it gets interesting. So you have an open library space. So again, there's no way to lock that down security-wise. It's very loud. It's in the middle of the space. And while sometimes you want the library to be kind of in a core space, having it being wide open isn't necessarily conducive to better learning, even especially at a middle school level as well. A lot of the learning support classrooms are kind of around there. So they're all glassy and open and undersized, and there's not enough of them. Then when you start getting up and into the pods, again, that corridor is very small. It's on split levels. So you have to go up a half level or down a half level. The first thing you get into are these kind of tiny little faculty rooms. And then each one of these 5 wedges was split 5 times into 5 classrooms done by particle board walls and things. So some have doors, some don't. So in this case, you've got to walk through classroom 3 to get to classroom 2. And then they multiplied that a whole bunch of times. Even some of the learning support classrooms as well that are there. So that's a lot of, like almost all of your classes in that building, all of your classrooms are in that half circle, all kind of jammed in there. The exterior ones have a window, which again is not insulated, but the interior ones don't have anything. So there's a lot of issues and concerns there. And then again, on the lower level, it's kind of the same setup. So it's really locked them into this team teaching that they're doing. You can really only ever have 10 classrooms per grade. There's a lot of challenges there, and just how limited that is because of the half circle, let alone a lot of building code issues with that. So easier said than done. One of the recommendations, eliminate the half circle. We're going to talk about a few opportunities there. But certainly like the new STEM labs and things like that are being infused, and you saw those kids tonight coming from those programs. It'd be great if they had more room, and certainly with 4 grades in that building, you could make the argument to have 3 or 4 rooms for STEM. The infrastructure issue here was masonry issues on the outside of the building. And again, that's becoming more and more of a serious concern. When water starts getting in and you have a big hole, it just allows for more water to get in. The site is big. You have Newton Ramsden up in the upper left and then the middle school in the middle. 82 acres. There's a lot of land there. One of the concerns was there's one road in and then over to Newton Ramsden and one road out. If there is another way to get some better circulation around in the middle school site. So one option was, hey, maybe there's a way to actually add another road. So now if I'm a middle school parent, I can come in, go around and come out. It provides a little bit more interior circulation onto that site. This is a state road down the bottom, so that would be tough to add more openings there. So one thought was maybe that a road would help with some of the drop-off and pickup issues. Then we said, well, what if we built an addition onto the side, a rectilinear addition onto the rectilinear portion of the school, then remove the half circle and come back and build a new gym there. So that layout here and just kind of boxes was saying, all right, well, if we keep half the school, we build a new half, and then we take down the circle half. And is there a way to kind of do all those things in a larger building project to try to take away that curved area that we all know is really causing some challenges? So here was one option to kind of take a look at that, but it certainly begs the question, well, geez, if you're doing all this, what happens if we just built a new school? With all that additional land, there is plenty of space for a new non-circular school building. We could run right up from the existing area from the state road there, maybe have buses and parking in a better location. So right now, the parents, when they're coming in to pick up students, have to essentially queue on the state road before they're even allowed in. We can certainly rectify that in a larger building scheme with a newer building. We talked a little bit about the separation then of, if this stayed 5-8, of primary students with secondary students. Seventh and eighth grade certainly has stricter curriculum around science and technology. Fifth and sixth graders, this is the first time they've never not been at their elementary school. So throwing them into an area with scary eighth graders, if they had their own space, if we kind of designed those classrooms a little bit more, almost like the classrooms they're leaving in elementary school, we've found and have some great examples. There's in East and Wilson area intermediate school, we did a school very similar to this. There was a 5-6 wing, cubbies in the classrooms, tech boards in the hallways. It felt like an elementary school, and a 7 and 8 wing. Lockers in the hallways, science labs, they were on a bell schedule. So it was almost like 2 schools in one. And one of the comments was this really helped with transition. When the fifth graders got here, it was a room that they were comfortable with. When they became middle schoolers, they were going to the same building. So it really kind of helped with that transition. You can kind of isolate that versus, like we said, really kind of throwing everybody in the mix together. And then, run a road through where the school is now, certainly adding a lot of additional fields. That was a comment about the limited athletic fields at the middle school site. And this would be certainly a way to provide that. Now, that's obviously a bigger move. We looked at a lot of different options. You could even build this as a 4-8 building. So 4th and 5th grade would be in the primary area, 5th and 8th grade, or 6th through 8th. So there's a lot of opportunities there. Obviously, the bigger the building, the more the cost. But there's a lot of things to consider if you're looking at building a new building in a way to remove yourself from that building. The middle school I mentioned in Northampton, that was 3 circles. That was not renovated. There is a new middle school in Northampton. Circles, I said this once in one of our meetings. Circles and floodplains are 2 things you can't renovate. Those are tough. We're good at what we do, but those are things that it's hard to renovate a circle. So that's a bit of a challenge. So those were some of the opportunities there at the middle school. Talked a little bit about the size of the building, serving 100 or 1,100 students. That's a very small school for that many students. Typically, you see secondary schools that are about 170 square feet per kid versus 127. So even the newer building would have a little bit more space to it. Energy efficiency certainly as well. It's a bit of a challenge because you'd be building a larger school, so your utility bills would go up just because it's a larger building, but the cost per square foot here goes from about $217 a square foot down to $152. So it's about a 30% more energy efficient building, but to be fair, it's a larger building, but certainly a much more energy efficient building. Lastly, the high school. Again, started in the 60s, renovated in the 90s. There's a couple of additions and things over time. Similar comments about ADA compliance. Similar comments are just about interior finishes and things like that. The building is not fully air conditioned. Parts of it are, some of it isn't. There are some building code issues when it comes to handrails, chalkboards, things like that. Some of the spaces are fine, just need to be modernized. The science labs and things like that are fine. They're just old. Some of the casework's falling apart. Again, the old sliding chalkboards and things like that are just starting to fall apart and kind of past their useful life. There are some humidity issues in some of the areas of the building. One of the rooms in particular was the orchestra room, starting to damage some of the string equipment and things like that. So paving, again, you own a lot of square feet of land, building and paving. So having a roofing project every summer, having a paving project every year is, in a way, something to kind of get used to. So there's certainly some need for just kind of continual maintenance issues in many of the spaces there. As I mentioned, educationally, again, it's older spaces. There are areas in the building, though, that we thought could really be conducive to being renovated and modernized. The library, and then you have what was a family consumer science room, or it is now. It's basically a tiered seating room right across from the library. It's a big space, just very kind of underutilized. And we kind of identified those and said, maybe there's some idea there of kind of retrofitting. Again, everything that you have, the programs are terrific. Some of the spaces are just a little small, and some of the spaces just need to be modernized a little bit. So again, educational areas, just kind of renovating some rooms within the building. Infrastructure-wise, looking at HVAC replacement in some areas, and again, replacing non-ADA compliant fixtures. So here we did take a little bit of a stab as well and said, here's some considerations. Maybe that family consumer science and world language area just kind of comes out, that curriculum could be placed somewhere else in the building. We kind of replace that with a student commons area. Maybe that library space gets renovated completely and becomes more of an open library commons, an area for students to go. We had a superintendent tell us once, I left school when school was over and I went to a Starbucks and half the senior class was there. I'm like, what are you doing? Well, this is where we go to hang out and study after school. He's like, well, why are you doing that at the school? I don't know, where would we go for that? There's no place for that type of interaction. There's no, that place for three of us to get together and sit in comfortable furniture that's flexible in areas that we can plug in a laptop and things like that. So that led to a library renovation. And a couple of other areas in that kind of core spot of the building. All of the bus drop off is all along here. There's 3 main entrances that all of those students go into, and all of them connect to this main hallway. So that space that's all in red there, if we had a concentration effort there of modernizing, it's not the whole building, but all of a sudden I'm walking through a front door that's new, that kind of sets the tone maybe for other parts of the building. If the building was ever expanded, one option was to expand that in the back. Right now, the building is obviously kind of U-shaped. You have to walk outside, which isn't the end of the world, to kind of cross the courtyard there. But if it was expanded in the future for additional labs, STEM labs, you have some terrific masonry programs and things like that that are in that lower level of where the aux gym is in the back. If some of those were added in the future, certainly that could be created with a link, and now you've got circulation now all the way through, actually with this guy as well. Some kind of, we call it racetrack circulation, where you can stay within the building and go around and around. And if I have a class in art here and I've got to get to social studies and it's raining, I don't have to go all the way around the building. So a quick kind of example of what that could look like in the library space, taking that library area, the common space, and starting to really just peel open walls. So right now there's a wall here. We just took the wall out. All those kind of tiered seating area, that's all there. If we paint it, add new lighting, open it up, provide some modern technology, maybe some areas for kids to charge their phones and laptops, that's a really cool space. That's the space where kids may go after school or before school. That's certainly a place where lectures could happen, or almost mini assemblies and things like that could happen. A space that's admittedly very, very open, so you're not having a testing center or anything like that in there. But this is right at the front door, and maybe an area where as kids are coming in early off the bus, there's a place to kind of congregate and collaborate. Again, the window is there, the doors are there, it's all there, just taking away a wall and kind of opening it up. The classrooms next to that then could be very collaborative as well. That can be opened up or transparent. If we wanted to maybe pull one of those, the robotic STEM class out of, I think it's the corner of the masonry room. Like you walk through masonry, which is all dirty and dusty, and you kind of go into like an old storage area, and that's where the robotic stuff is happening, which is really cool. They don't like that they're crossing each other's spaces. Great, move them to another space. Let's open that up and not limit what they can do because of the size of the space they're doing it in to maybe a space like that. And again, that space is already there. It's no offense to social studies, but I think that can happen in a different classroom. This is right on the main hallway of the school. Now all of a sudden we have really a brand new space there. Some areas for teachers and students to gather. Instructional planning centers. This is kind of a big one for teachers. If they're during their study breaks, during their times where they have breaks, if they have areas to go to and meet with students, maybe out in a public area, or if they need to for a little bit more privacy, back in an area of areas for that. So now I've got a faculty-centered space that's also very transparent and very welcoming for students to join. Some small group instruction rooms maybe across the hall. And again, we're just creating some different types of spaces in that building. The library then gets a little bit smaller by some of those added spaces that we had. We still have areas for books, but we kind of keep them in one side. You still have that hexagon skylight, which is really pretty cool, bringing a lot of natural light into that space, but we're just modernizing that area with different fixtures, new furniture, and some a little bit more modern technology. we actually went to a conference while we were talking about this. There's a school in Texas, and wanted to share some of the images there for what that could look like. So they kind of did some of this in their newer school. Again, this is what a library commons kind of looks like. This is what one of those SGIs looks like. So all these kids are coming in with their laptop, they're going to a TV, they're working together. That's a glass wall behind them. So again, they're teenagers. We need to make sure we can keep an eye on them. But they have their own room. They have their own little office where they can do their business and work together. But it's in an area like the library or across from that faculty area where students can be monitored but still have a little bit of independence. And then this was an idea of that kind of instructional area. We broke down the cost for this project just to kind of show you how we would break down the cost really for anything. Cost per square foot, level of intensity of work that's being done. Contingencies are always important because costs go up. Things get added to projects. Construction contingencies are important because even after the bids go out and somebody opens up the ceiling, we go, wait a second, I didn't know that was there. We need to fix that. So let's make sure we budget some additional money set aside for that. Furniture, soft costs, fees and testing and all of those things relate to what a total project cost is. So sometimes we'll say, this was a $5 million project. Well, really it's a $7 million project when you add in the contingencies and furniture and all the other things that were required to do the $5 million project. So this is just an option for breaking down this specific opportunity, but how that would all work as well. So again, here the considerations is, the first one is saying maybe we should consider replacing or heavily modifying the middle school, some infrastructure upgrades in the high school, academic and student-centered areas, athletic fields, and things like that. So the consideration of everything in the study, the big recommendation was, again, really focusing on the possibility of a new middle school or a very heavy addition renovation portion there. And then look for high-impact, low-cost things like renovating portions of the high school. Certainly looking at improving some of the interior elements of the elementary schools and HVAC infrastructure improvements really at all the schools. So one of the questions that was asked at one of our meetings was, well, how long does something like this take? So in a couple of different projects, if you're looking at like a simple renovation, something where we're, maybe moving a few walls, but no big additions. The large portion of that construction happens in the summer. So all of those things need to be prepared, purchased, ready to go. Most of our summer jobs that are going to happen in the summer of 23, we bid in November, December. Like they're already done, the bids are already good. We're having a meeting with contractors about buying stuff, and we are in February now, but that'll happen in January. So that all this stuff is on site, they're ready to go for that 10-week window when they can go in there and do a lot of things in the school. So it starts with the word go from a school board. It takes about 9 months to plan those things and coordinate all those things. So really, even from the start, let's say in the spring of any particular year, you're looking to complete that next summer. So if you said, hey, let's do some work this summer, I'd tell you, well, no, not this summer. You mean next summer. So in any given year, and again, we're not adding a specific year, we're just saying, a springtime yes is ready for the ribbon cutting to happen the following summer. Something like Waverly, with addition and a renovation, kind of a similar plan, but we may be doing that over 2 summers. So again, now it may take about 12 months to plan. We still want to be bidding those types of things in October, November. Again, to open up a new school or open up any types of things, there's always 2 things in Pennsylvania. School starts the end of August, and the ground starts to thaw in March. So you want to break ground in March, and it's got to be done in August. And usually that's about 18 months from March of year 1 to August of, say, year 2. So here we are saying, maybe a summer start, 12 months of planning, getting ready for summer of year 2 would be the start of the project. Summer of year 3 would be the end of it. New construction obviously takes a lot longer, and that's because of additional approvals and things like that from the state and local officials. New construction for a new school takes about 2.5 years. And then after that, there's an additional year of demolition. A lot of times everybody forgets that. The new school is open. Why are all these construction trucks there? Well, remember the old school, we got to take that down. And where that old school was, remember all those fields in the parking lot? That takes some time to do as well. So A school that we just opened in August, the site work was all done right before the new year. So there was still construction work in the demo from September to January. So again, the start from the word go, say summer, fall of a year, you're bidding a year after that. The school is open 2 years after that. There would still be a few minor things to do. So in a bigger piece like that, if somebody said, hey, that's great, we have to think about it, great. From the word go, it's still 4 years before you're cutting a ribbon and moving students into a project of that scale. That size. So next steps, as we said, feedback and listening sessions. I think it's a really good idea to kind of break that down with elementary schools, middle, and high school. We want to hear comments and ideas, certainly involve the community. This here was just a list of, I think what Mr. Schaefer went over earlier about those things.
Okay, at this time, we can take some questions. I don't believe we have any from the floor. So if there's any board members that have any questions, feel free.
Obviously, it's the right thing to do. But aren't we beyond like the grandfathered in?
Yeah, so the issue with there is no grandfather clauses to ADA compliance. In 1992, when that law was passed, there were a lot of buildings that were not in compliance. You were never grandfathered in. The way building codes work, well, they'll say if you're renovating to a certain extent, meaning you're moving walls, you're doing things at a pretty high level from kind of one side of the building to the other, you are then required to make sure your building is ADA compliant. So a lot of times you kind of wait in a way until you're doing something much larger to do those types of things. But you are not ADA compliant the entire time you're waiting. We do a lot of projects that are infrastructure and ADA projects where we need to fix the air conditioning, we need to provide some better heating and cooling. Let's go in and just fix all of the ADA issues. Because again, ADA is, as soon as there's an incident, it's been 30 years of that law, federal law being passed. A lot of times now people are saying, well, you've had 30 years, you should be compliant. So, your buildings are accessible. Any building that has multiple floors has elevators and things, but it's really a lot of plumbing areas and things like that, door handles. There are a lot of things, seating in gyms and stuff like that, making sure that you're providing that type of compliance is important. So unlike the fire marshal that comes every year to just make sure you're up to snuff with fire codes, it doesn't happen with ADA compliance, but it's become, as I said, one of those things where you are not compliant, and as soon as there's an issue, you have not been compliant for a while, and that issue needs to be fixed.
Thank you, Mike, Emily, for coming today. And as a reminder, tomorrow at 9 a.m., we'll be sending out a messenger with all the details. This information is also available on our website. And please remember as well that there is a QR code at the end of the presentation that you can provide us with feedback that will also be available at all 3 sessions in February and early March. Thanks.
Mike, I just want to thank you for everything you've done. I mean, we've been working with you for many months now, and we interviewed a whole bunch of firms for this assignment, and we picked you guys, and we made a great decision. I'm really impressed with what you put together.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you for the collaborative back and forth between you guys and the district. It's been great. Thank you.
Public comment.
Okay, we're going to move on to the public comment. If anyone would like to come up and address the board, please state your name and where you're from. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Renee Sabovitz. I am from North Abington Township. My daughter attends Abington Heights. And my comment was on an item that had been on the agenda but was removed. I have some feedback after seeing what was on the agenda. In the past, we had hired a COVID coordinator, a director of educational services, a dean of students at the middle school, and these are all new administrative positions. And now we are spending yet again on another administrative position. And in the agenda, it had coverage, and we would fill that by hiring a principal in the middle school for 3 months. Spending more and more money again while people are tightening their budgets, electric bills, gas, oil, groceries, healthcare. All of our budgets are going up, and we are really watching our dollars. And it was upsetting to see another position being filled from the outside. I don't know if anyone has heard of flex roles in a company. When someone will be out for a leave of absence, that's how a company covers the employee's duties. That's how they do this in a private company. We have extra administrators in the middle school. We now have this new position, a dean of students. The middle school functioned before with an assistant principal and a principal. And I don't see why that can't happen now for 3 months while the principal is on her leave. Or maybe we can float some of the elementary principals. Before, we did not have a principal for each elementary school, and the coverage was done via scheduling. We have the middle school principal, the former middle school principal at Waverly. Is there any way to move her into the middle school or to go to the middle school part-time? Has anyone looked at scheduling to be a solution versus hiring another person for 3 months? Is there anyone on the board who represents the taxpayers and looks at saving money and cutting costs versus the continuous spend, 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 spend? And I would like to ask too that this item had been deleted from the agenda. So does that mean that this matter has already been decided? We're now looking at ways that we can save money and do this another way, looking at other options to cover for this principal absence of 3 months. Thank you.
Sure, I'll take a moment to respond to some of that. I did pull off 2 personnel items on today's agenda so that the board would have an opportunity to discuss in an executive session at a later time. And I do hear what you are saying, and we will have a discussion about that. However, with that said, one thing that I want to make clear is, one, the board did approve a director of educational services. We do not have a director of educational services. We haven't spent any money on that. We haven't advertised for that position. We'll be looking at our budget over the next 3 months, and we'll have to make some decisions. So that is not a position where we are spending money. The COVID position, as it was referred to, is an EDR. That was a supplemental. That was not a position. Maggie, do you know what the cost of that?
It's $2,000 and it's a teacher, not an administrator.
Yeah. So a teacher had covered that for $2,000 per some of the regulations that came out for reporting from the Department of Health, and I can find out how much we've expended on that. And yes, the dean of students is a teaching position there. So certainly the board will take a look at that. And at the top of their list, and what I will tell them is I should say that, I will not compromise the integrity of student safety in our schools. And we'll keep that at the forefront while also taking a look at all other opportunities to work on short-term solutions here. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Schaefer. Thanks for your comments. So we're going to move on to the action discussion items. You want to
Yep.
take the reins here?
Mr. Azar, I would like for the board to consider a motion to approve the personnel report as presented.
So moved.
On the question? Roll call?
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson,
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah,
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Azar.
Yes.
7 yes.
Hello. All right, don't worry. All right, Phil, can you hear us now?
Yes.
All right.
Motion
passes.
Motion passes, yes.
Mr. Azar, I'd like the board to consider a motion to approve the revised tuition agreement between Abington Heights School District and New Story for student 23A.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call?
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson,
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah,
Yes.
Mr. Azar, I'm sorry, Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Azar.
Yes.
7 yes, motion carries.
Mr. Azar, I'd ask that the board consider a motion to approve the revised 2022-23 Abington Heights school calendar.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call?
Mr. Robeson,
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah,
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mr. Azar.
Yes.
7 yes.
Before I present this next motion, I'd just like to take a moment to inform everybody that over the past year, I've spoken on many occasions about what I perceive to be unfair funding for school districts relative to charter school reimbursements. This is something that we have advocated with other superintendents and board members in Harrisburg. We've certainly spoke with local legislators, and certainly we feel that impact on our school budget. This resolution before you today has been passed by approximately 450 school districts in the state of Pennsylvania, calling on all of our legislators and our new governor to pass fair funding. So at this time, I would ask the board to consider a motion to approve the resolution calling for charter school funding reform.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion?
I just want to commend Dr. Schaefer and all of our administration for helping our district to be a part of this resolution, because this is very important for us and for all the school districts in the state of Pennsylvania.
Roll call?
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah,
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson,
Yes.
Mr. Azar.
Yes.
7 yes, motion carries.
Seeing the action items, right? Do we have any information to share? No? Any unfinished business or new business?
I'd like to just ask a couple questions. We just recently had a virtual day. Could we get some feedback on how the success of that was? If you felt all of our students have the opportunity to be in a virtual classroom with their teacher, if there's an attendance policy,
Could you just kind of give us an education on how it went and what were the steps to prepare for it and what you need to do in the future to prepare for it more?
You want to? Yeah, go ahead.
I didn't hear any negative feedback. We have changed the elementary model so that it's not camera on for the entire 6 hours of instruction. And I've heard positive feedback about that it is a little bit more project-based and it doesn't necessarily have students interfacing with the camera the entire time. The middle school has altered minorly. The high school has remained the same, but I would say that we haven't heard any negative feedback, which to me is usually a positive. Attendance has remained the same as it has since we started doing virtual, so there hasn't been really any changes. And I would say that it is the winter, so always prepare that we could go virtual at any point. So I would say I think it's going well because I have not heard otherwise, but I haven't specifically checked in on that question.
So all of our students have Chromebooks or whatnot to take home with them to be able to turn on their screen?
I would say that all students that need access have access to it. I have not had any complaints of families that do not have access.
Oh, great. Okay, thank you, Maggie.
Dr. Vitale, you mentioned attendance. You can monitor how many students are on virtually.
Absolutely.
And
So
what's that number this time versus what you normally would have had for a non-virtual day?
So I don't have that data of what the daily average attendance was on that date versus a regular student day.
Anybody else? Okay, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
I just want to make sure I hit end stream.